Welcome to episode 7 of Shane Talks 99. It is February 26th, 1999, and it is Sex Week 1999. Kind of, sort of. All three of these flicks I'm going to talk about today kind of have their own sexual content for the specific audience that went to see these movies this weekend. So chances are, if you were in the cinema on February 26th, 27th, 28th of 1999 watching a new release, you were getting some kind of sex sprinkled into your story. And I'm not talking about the raunchy sex stuff, because we've got next week to talk about some of that. And then we've got a lot to talk about in August when my generation's version of Porky's gets talked about. But there is levels of sex that we're going to talk about in all three of these flicks. First up, this one I was not able to rewatch this week. It's a Miramax film, makes it really, really hard to find. It's not streaming anywhere. But back in 2019, I'm pretty sure it was streaming on one of the platforms because I remember watching it a couple of years ago. Because in 1999, I went back and was trying. This weekend is the first weekend I remember trying to go back and rewatch all of these movies from 1999, which is why, a couple of weeks, the first 6 episodes, I had to go back and rewatch them because most of them weren't fresh in my memory. Moving forward, they should be pretty fresh in my memory, at least the ones that I made the time to watch. Some weeks I only watched one of them or whatnot. So still this year for this podcast, I'm going to go back and keep rewatching stuff. So it's fresh in my brain to talk about. Like I said, the movie 200 Cigarettes, Miramax film, not able to find it streaming anywhere. So I'm going to have to go with what I remember from a couple of years ago. So let's see. It's kind of like a Love Actually kind of story. Not so disjointed. Because the plot of the movie revolves around Martha Plimpton's character wanting to throw a New Year's Eve party. It's the last day of 1980 going into 1981. So she's trying to throw a huge New Year's Eve party for all of her friends. Throughout the course of the film, we see what all of her friends were doing up until the point when they arrive at her party. She's at home with one of her friends, lamenting about the fact that nobody is showing up, and she's just getting blackout drunk because she thinks that her party isn't going to be successful. She thinks that her and her one friend are the only people that are going to be there all night. The movie shows us what all of her other friends are doing before they end up making it to her party. They're all having pre-party stuff going on in their lives. So for the cast of 200 Cigarettes, let's run this down real quick in alphabetical order. We got the Affleck brothers. Right on the heels of 2 years earlier, they had done Good Will Hunting together, so it was awesome to see Ben Affleck and Casey Affleck in a movie together, even though in Good Will Hunting they share almost every scene together, or a lot of scenes together. This movie they don't at all. Dave Chappelle plays a cab driver. Janeane Garofalo is in this movie. Gabby Hoffman, Kate Hudson, Courtney Love, who I'm not a huge fan of, but Garbage is an okay band. Jay Moore from Saturday Night Live is on here. Martha Plimpton, like I said, plays kind of the main character of the movie, the one that brings everybody together. Christina Ricci is in this film, and Paul Rudd in one of his very awkward looking. He's got weird facial hair and stuff in this movie. It's kind of creepy looking. So anyway, like I said, we got a pair of teenagers that are trying to make it to this party. That would be Gabby Hoffman and Christina Ricci. They end up at the same bar that Casey Affleck is at. So their characters have some interactions. Let's see. Paul Rudd is dating Janeane Garofalo. They're at a bar where Paul Rudd is also hanging out with Courtney Love. He ends up getting caught making out with Courtney Love. There's a lot of sexual tension between them that leads up to them going to the bathroom and starting to make out and get it on. And then Janeane Garofalo walks in on them. Dave Chappelle, like I said, plays a cab driver that drives some of the characters around throughout the course of the film. And then Ben Affleck is a really weird bartender who just is very open and has a lot of sexual comments and connotations that he throws out through his scenes in the movie. So, like I said, Martha Plimpton's character trying to throw this party gets really blackout drunk because of the fact that she feels like none of her friends are going to show up. The best part of this movie is honestly something that I feel like The Hangover stole from this movie. During the credits, there's a bunch of Polaroids of what actually ended up happening because all of her friends do eventually show up at her party, but she's already blackout drunk and passed out. So the credits show you all of her friends that finally made it to the party taking pictures with her as she's passed out. Like I said, it's kind of a gag that The Hangover did in their end credits. And I kind of feel like it was stolen from 200 Cigarettes. So that's just my personal opinion, but it's also part of kind of one of my favorite parts of the movie because like Weekend at Bernie's like they're like holding up her passed out body and taking pictures with her. I think it's pretty funny. So next up is the film that you probably, when you think about it, would think no sexual connotations at all, nothing sexual in this movie, and you'd be totally wrong. The movie The Other Sister, starring Juliette Lewis and Giovanni Ribisi. It's a movie about two mentally handicapped characters, and I feel like nowadays there'd be a lot of problems with it, which is unfortunate because I actually think this is a really good and enjoyable movie. But the fact that it's two actors who are not mentally challenged playing mentally challenged characters, I feel like there'd be a lot of backlash for that now. There's also not anti-gay stuff in it, but there is a lesbian couple that the mother character is not okay with until the end of the film. So I'll address that here in a second. But overall, I think it's pretty good. Giovanni Ribisi and Juliette Lewis, both solid acting when it comes to this. I think it's stellar. Like they both portray these characters and like their problems and their anxieties and like how they act. And for me, I think is really good acting. And I just hope that other people would see it as like part of what draws a lot of people to be actors is playing something different from who they are. Like, being able to play a pirate, like people aren't really pirates, or, being able to play like an action adventure star like Indiana Jones. Like sometimes there are some actors that like the challenge of, playing a mentally handicapped character like this, or like Milo, what is his name? The kid from Full House. He was in Mercury Rising with Bruce Willis. He was also in Pet Sematary. His first name is Milo. I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but like the documentary or the behind the scenes stuff on the Mercury Rising DVD showing like the hours and hours that he spent hanging out with autistic kids so that he could portray them as an actor, portray an autistic character. Like I feel like Giovanni Ribisi and Juliette Lewis had to have done a lot of that for these characters because they're really well acted, in my opinion. So I feel like the movie itself was kind of ahead of its time because it deals with a lot of mental health issues, and the mother character to Juliette Lewis is played by Diane Keaton, and she is phenomenal in this movie. But like I said, she's also dealing with one of her daughters comes out as gay in this movie, and she has trouble with it. And I feel like Diane Keaton does a great job of playing this mother character who's honestly not even super likable because she's kind of overbearing and she's kind of like my way is always the right way type thing. She has a wonderful transformation throughout the course of the film. She is very protective of her daughters, and she has to learn to kind of let that go and let her daughters be their own people. So it's a lot of acceptance on her character through the story arc of the movie. And I think Diane Keaton does a great job with that. So like I said at the beginning of this, there's quite a bit of sexual stuff in this movie. Early on, Diane Keaton and Juliette Lewis have conversations about sex where like the mother is doing it in a very like, what you would say to like a 10 or a 12-year-old child about sex. And Juliette Lewis's character is just very blunt and like, oh, I've talked about sex with, because she came from a boarding school. She's like, they taught us all about sex. I know all about, reproductive organs and male genitalia and all this kind of stuff. Later on in the movie, once her and Giovanni Ribisi like cross that border into boyfriend, girlfriend, we're dating, it's like immediately like, when are we gonna have sex? How soon do we get to have sex type thing? To the point where like Giovanni Ribisi's character shows up with a banana and a bunch of condoms and tells her, I'll show you how to put a condom on with this banana. Like really kind of bizarre when you think about the fact that these are like characters that are supposed to be adults, but like still just don't have that adult mental capability. Like it's very kind of weird for me, but like, they address it, they do it, they treat them like normal people. And even though it was a little uncomfortable as a viewer, like I feel like it was very well done for just like people. I feel like they were kind of pushing the envelope with that, and they were pushing the envelope with like the not that there weren't other lesbian characters in other movies before this, but like it wasn't something that was in a lot of mainstream movies. A lot of art house movies dealt with stuff like that. So very, very interesting. The film also deals with alcoholism on a couple of different levels. Juliette Lewis's father is a recovering alcoholic when the movie takes place. In the flashbacks, you find out that he was a heavy drinker, but the day that they took her to the boarding school that they essentially committed her to, he stopped drinking, and for 8 years from then until when the movie takes place, he hasn't had a drink. So it deals with his recovery and how he's done that for the family because of the daughter. Also, Giovanni Ribisi's character gets super drunk a couple of different times in the movies. One of the times is with Hector Elizondo, who plays his landlord. Really kind of a touching scene, a kind of a Giovanni Ribisi's father is very absent in the movie. Hector Elizondo plays his landlord friend, father figure, and it's kind of a really sweet scene between the two of them. But he explains why he likes drinking so much, because it makes him feel like a courageous person. So later on in the movie, when he decides he wants to profess his love publicly to Juliette Lewis's character, he gets shit-faced drunk, starts professing his love, and everybody starts laughing. They're really laughing at him, but in Juliette Lewis's character's mind and in Diane Keaton's mind, he's embarrassing her. So it's kind of a sad moment that causes trouble in their relationship. Does it feel kind of forced? Yeah, sort of. The speed of script, the speed of plot, it needed to be done and said. So that's kind of I feel like the movie could have been written a little bit better, which is odd because it's written by a guy who I really enjoy, written and directed by Gary Marshall. Well, he was co-writer on the movie. But then Gary Marshall directed this film. I'm a really big fan of Gary Marshall's work. Later this year in 1999, he also directed Runaway Bride, which we'll talk about later. So yeah, The Other Sister, really solid, very enjoyable movie. I found myself liking it a lot more than I remembered liking it. Again, a little more sexual content than I remembered from the last time I saw it. But very, very enjoyable, very, very worth watching. Our third and last film we're going to talk about this week, super sexualized. Lots of sex going on in this movie. Not necessarily a lot of sex going on, but a lot of sex content going on. Our third film is the Nicolas Cage film 8mm. It's one of Joaquin Phoenix's biggest early roles, but Nick Cage stars as a private investigator. He is hired by this wealthy old woman because her husband dies. When her husband dies and they're going through his property, a snuff film is found where it starts out looking like a porno, and then a guy in a mask kills a woman, in theory. So Nicolas Cage is hired to go find out who that woman is and if she is actually still alive or if she was actually murdered on film. Just kind of trying to find out, does my husband actually own a legit snuff film? So it kind of then becomes a good mystery thriller throughout the rest of the movie. He eventually hunts down who the girl was. He finds her mother. Her mother thinks that she's still a runaway. Her mother believes that she ran away to California with her boyfriend. The boyfriend, we find out, is played by an extremely young Norman Reedus. 1999 was also the year that Europe got to see him in Boondock Saints. It didn't come out until January of 2000 over here in the United States, but a lot of people still consider Boondock Saints a 1999 film. I technically don't because it didn't have an American release date until January of 2000, but anyway, Norman Reedus, one of his very, very first early acting roles is in here. Through Nicolas Cage's investigation, he goes on to run into Joaquin Phoenix, and Joaquin Phoenix kind of becomes a sidekick character for him for a while, helping him figure out like who made this pornographic film. They end up tracing it back to a production company, where the production company is ran by James Gandolfini himself, a very young James Gandolfini, which is interesting because in just 2 years, he's going to be in the Mexican, where he is a lot older he looks a lot older than he does here in 8mm. So after they trace it to James Gandolfini, they end up finding out that the person above him is Peter Stormare, which the year earlier in '98 he was in Armageddon. He was the Russian guy in Armageddon. Uh, Pretty much any Russian bad guy you've ever seen is probably Peter Stormare. Really, really great actor. Love that he was on the TV show Prison Break. So he was really cool. Um, so they work their way all the way up to him. They get all these people in the room together. They get the masked guy in the room. They finally hunt him down. Who's a small actor, Chris something is his name, but he was also with Nicolas Cage in Face Off, which I thought was pretty cool. He Zubovsky or whoever, the Russian guy that was locked up on Erewhon prison with him. That's who he played in that. So kind of cool to see them back on screen together, even though it's in a very antagonistic way. Um, After all these people get figured out, the last third of the movie, very much a revenge film where uh, Nicolas Cage's character is kind of going after all the people that were involved, kind of trying to kill them. Not even necessarily trying to kill them, just trying to question them for answers, and kind of gets carried away at sometimes. The last third of the movie, pretty enjoyable. There's a scene like near the very end of the movie. There's a scene in a house that is really, really tense as he's hunting down one of the bad guys. It goes from having loud music to being very quiet and silent and very tense. Really, really well done and well shot, in my opinion, which kind of makes sense because the director of this is a guy that I really like, but I'm very hot and cold on him because it's Joel Schumacher, who's directed movies that I love, like St. Elmo's Fire, one of my top 10 of all time. The Lost Boys is an amazing film. Falling Down. He's done 2 John Grisham movies. I'm a big John Grisham fan. He did The Client and A Time to Kill, which were both really good adaptations of John Grisham books. But Joel Schumacher will always be the dude who put nipples on Batman. And that makes it really hard for me to like anything Joel Schumacher did. In November, we're going to be looking at his other 1999 film that he directed. It was called Flawless, starring Robert De Niro and Philip Seymour Hoffman. I don't remember this movie very well, so when we get down to November, I'm excited to give it another go. So that's it for this week's sex trifecta that we had of movies. And next week, we're actually going to continue our 1999 sex talk when we have Cruel Intentions. Probably in my top 5 movies that came out in 1999. One of my favorite, like, teen, not a rom-com in any way, but one of my teen movies of the 90s, like Cruel Intentions, right up there at the top. We'll also have Bobby De Niro attempting a stab at comedy and being a comedian in Analyze This with Billy Crystal. And the British Invasion, which started week 2 with Still Crazy. We get Guy Ritchie, his British invasion into the United States with the release of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. So next week's going to be a lot of fun, and I look forward to talking to you about that next week. Thanks, guys.